Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. I want to thank everybody for making this happen today, and I want to remind everybody this is a nonpartisan issue. This has nothing to do with party politics. I think the cover-up goes a lot deeper than that. I also want to thank my colleagues, Representative Anna Paulina Luna, sitting beside me here, Jared Moskowitz, my friend across the aisle, has an incredible mind, and I'm anxious to hear his questions, my buddy Eric Burleson, and it's not in my notes here, but Matt Gates. If it hadn't been for Matt Gates, myself, him, and Luna would still be down at Eglin Air Force Base trying to get some answers. He's got an incredible legal mind. Also, I know I saw it in the crowd there, George Knapp, my buddy Jeremy Corbell. They're not witnesses, but they've provided some statements on this subject, and I seek unanimous consent to enter those statements into the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
Also, would like to enter in, I understand now that this is unclassified and it's public record, but as we all know, that's sometimes difficult for the public to get a hold of. A report, Defense Intelligence reference documents, Advanced Space Propulsion Based on Vacuum, Space-Time Metric Engineering, some light reading for some of our members.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. Knapp wrote, since 1969, the position of our military has been that UFOs pose no threat to national security and are not worthy of further study. I'd say that's the biggest understatement of the decade. He also goes on to talk about the dismissive attitude. It's at odds with what was revealed in documents, reports, and internal memos. And Mr. Cabral says, as he writes these words, the UFO is emerging as a major topic of global importance. I can state that as a fact. Out there, I met a fellow who came in here all the way from Denmark to be here for this meeting. So this is huge. This is worldwide. I think we suspect what's going on, but I'd also like to thank the members of Congress who have supported our efforts to make this hearing happen. Some have even confided to me that they've had UFO sightings of their own. Those members, of course, some of them wish to remain anonymous, and I'll keep it that way. But also, finally, I'd like to thank these three brave witnesses here. They took an oath. They took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and dadgummit, they're doing it. And we owe them a debt of gratitude. Y'all quit clapping, you're cutting in on my time. Just kidding. These folks, they've got nothing to gain from this, and I think you're going to find out that they've endured quite a few slings and arrows. We need to remember them in our prayers and their families. And I'm thankful to them for their honest testimonies. They have done interviews and appeared in documentaries like Accidental Truth to get their stories out there, and now they are all here to testify under oath for Congress. It's been so difficult to get here today. I've said, in the Baptist church, we'd say that the devil's in our way. And the devil has been in our way through this thing. We've run into roadblocks from members, from the intelligence community, the Pentagon. I proposed legislation to go in the FAA reauthorization that just said if an airline pilot has a sighting, that when he makes that report to the FAA, that it would come to Congress. But I was told that the intelligence community did not like that, and the amendment was not even heard in committee. I think it's time for this country to take back our country. We need to tell the folks at the Pentagon they work for us. Dadgummit, we don't work for them. And that's exactly the point. This is an issue of government transparency. We can't trust a government that does not trust its people. We're not bringing little green men or flying saucers into the hearing. Sorry to disappoint about half y'all. We're just going to get to the facts. We're going to uncover the cover-up, and I hope this is just the beginning of many more hearings and more people coming forward about this. And I yield back the remainder of my time. I think, is it to Representative Luna, Mr. Chairman, or is that?
Yeah, we'll call Ms. Luna for her statement.
Today is the first hearing of its kind where we will attempt to get down to the bottom of what is actually happening with UAPs. But we will hear from people who have had personal sightings rather than Pentagon bureaucrats who have always been sent to stonewall our investigations. Just so that the press knows and the people know, we were even denied access to a classified briefing in a SCIF prior to this hearing due to the amount of hoops that we had to jump through to grant temporary clearance to witness Grush, who has knowledge of classified information. It is time to have an open-minded discussion on this topic, to hear the evidence and understand the magnitude of what this means, not just for our nation, but for humanity. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back the rest of my time.
We will hear testimony from witnesses today with a long record of service, to the American people and with subject matter expertise. Our witnesses have a unique opportunity to share their perspective, insights, and their experiences with the American people. And I encourage all of my colleagues to engage with these difficult questions with an open mind and to follow the facts on behalf of our country. I also just want to say more broadly that we should look at this hearing and believe that everything is on the table as it relates to UAPs. I think an open mind is absolutely the best.
Right, now I'd like to introduce our witnesses. Our first witness is Lieutenant Ryan Graves. He's the Executive Director of Americans for Safe Aerospace. Lieutenant Graves is also a former U.S. Navy F-18 pilot with his own UAP experience. The next witness, David Grush, is a former senior intelligence officer with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and was a senior technical advisor for UAP issues. And finally, retired Navy Commander David Fravor, squadron leader who worked as a naval aviator for 18 years. Mr. Fravor has his own UAP experience, known as the TikTok event. I look forward to hearing from all three of you today. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witnesses will please stand and raise their right hands. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show that all the witnesses answered in the affirmative. You may be seated. We appreciate you all being here today and look forward to your testimony. I'll remind the witnesses that we have read your written statements and they will appear in full in the hearing record. Please try to limit your oral statements to 5 minutes. As a reminder, please press the button on the microphone in front of you so that it's on and the members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, it'll turn yellow, and the red light, when that comes on, it tells you your 5 minutes have expired. I'll now recognize Mr. Graves for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you. Chairman Grothman, Ranking Member Garcia, distinguished members of the House Oversight Subcommittee on National Security, Representatives Burchett and Luna. My name is Ryan Fobbs Graves, and I am a former F-18 pilot with a decade of service in the U.S. Navy, including 2 deployments in Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Inherent Resolve. I have experienced advanced UAP firsthand, and I'm here to voice the concerns of more than 30 commercial aircrew and military veterans who have confided their similar encounters with me. Today, I would like to highlight 3 critical issues that demand our action. As we convene here, UAP are in our airspace, but they are grossly underreported. These sightings are not rare or isolated, they are routine. Military aircrew and commercial pilots, trained observers whose lives depend on accurate identification, are frequently witnessing these phenomena. The stigma attached to UAP is real and powerful and challenges national security. It silences commercial pilots who fear professional repercussions, discourages witnesses, and is only compounded by recent government claims questioning the credibility of eyewitness testimony. Parts of our government are aware of more about UAP than they let on, but excessive classification practices keep crucial information hidden. Since 2021, all UAP videos are classified as secret or above. This level of secrecy not only impedes our understanding, but fuels speculation and mistrust. In 2014, I was an F-18 Foxtrot pilot in the Navy Fighter Attack Squadron 11, the Red Rippers, and I was stationed at NAS Oceana in Virginia Beach. After upgrades were made to our jet's radar systems, we began detecting unknown objects operating in our airspace. At first, we assumed they were radar errors, but soon we began to correlate the radar tracks with multiple onboard sensors, including infrared systems, eventually through visual ID. During a training mission in Warning Area Whiskey 72, 10 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, 2 F-18 Super Hornets were split by a UAP. The object, described as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere, came within 50 feet of the lead aircraft and was estimated to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter. The mission commander terminated the flight immediately and returned to base. Our squadron submitted a safety report, but there was no official acknowledgement of the incident and no further mechanism to report the sightings. Soon, these encounters became so frequent that aircrew would discuss the risk of UAP as part of their regular pre-flight briefs.
I served at the NRO Operations Center on the director's briefing staff, which included the coordination of the presidential daily brief and supporting variety of contingency operations, which I was the Reserve Intelligence Division Chief backup. In 2019, the UAP Task Force Director asked me to identify all special access programs and controlled access programs, also known as SAPs and CAPs, We needed to satisfy our congressionally mandated mission, and we were direct report at the time to the DepSecDef. At the time, due to my extensive executive level intelligence support duties, I was cleared to literally all relevant compartments and in a position of extreme trust, both in my military and civilian capacities. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, to which I was denied access to those additional read-ons when I requested it. I made the decision, based on the data I collected, to report this information to my superiors and multiple inspectors general, and in effect becoming a whistleblower. As you know, I've suffered retaliation for my decision, but I am hopeful that my actions will ultimately lead to a positive outcome of increased transparency. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Congressmen, Congresswomen. I want to first thank you for the invitation to speak to the committee on the UAP topic that has been in the news for the past 6 years and seems to be continuing to gain momentum. As you know, my name is David Fravor. I'm a retired commander in the United States Navy. In 2004, I was a commanding officer of Strike Fighter Squadron 41, the world-famous Black Aces. We were attached to Carrier Wing 11, stationed on board the USS Nimitz, and had begun a 2-month workup cycle off the coast of California. On this day, we were scheduled for a 2v2 air-to-air training with the USS Princeton as our control. When we launched off Nimitz, my wingman was joining up. We were told that the training was going to be suspended and we were going to proceed with real-world tasking. As we proceeded to the west, the air controller was counting down the range to an object that we were going to, and we were unaware of what we were going to see when we arrived. The controller had told us that these objects had been observed for over 2 weeks, coming down from over 80,000 feet, rapidly descending to 20,000 feet, hanging out for hours, and then going straight back up. For those who don't realize, above 80,000 feet is space. We arrived at the location at approximately 20,000 feet, and the controller called merge plot, which means that our radar blip was now in the same resolution cell as the contact. As we looked around, we noticed that we saw some whitewater off our right side. It's important to note that the weather on this day was as close to perfect as you could ask for off the coast of San Diego. Clear skies, light winds, calm seas, no whitecaps from waves. So the whitewater stood out in a large blue ocean. All 4 of us, because we were in F-18Fs, so we had pilots and Wizzo in the back seat, looked down saw a white tic-tac object with a longitudinal axis pointing north-south and moving very abruptly over the water like a ping-pong ball. There were no rotors, no rotor wash, or any sign of visible control surfaces like wings. As we started clockwise towards the object, my Wizzo and I decided to go down and take a closer look with the other aircraft staying in high cover to observe both us and the tic-tac. We proceeded around the circle about 90 degrees from the start of our descent, and the object suddenly shifted its longitudinal axis, aligned it with my aircraft, and began to climb. We continued down another 270 degrees, nose low, where the tic-tac, or we considered 270 degrees to where, and we went nose low to where the tic-tac would have been. Our altitude at this point was about 15,000 feet, and the tic-tac was about 12,000. As we pulled nose onto the object, within about a half mile of it, it rapidly accelerated in front of us and disappeared. Our wingmen, roughly 8,000 feet above us, lost contact also. We immediately turned back to see where the whitewater was at, and it was gone also. So as we started to turn back towards the east, the controller came up and said, "Sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is at your cap point, roughly 60 miles away in less than a minute. You can calculate the speed." We returned to Nimitz. We were taking off our gear. We were talking to one of my crews that was getting ready to launch. We mentioned it to them, and they went out and luckily got the video that you see, that 90-second video. What you don't see is the radar tape that was never released, and we don't know where it's at, of the active jamming that the object put on an APG-73 radar, and I can get into modes later if you're interested. What is shocking to us is that the incident was never investigated. None of my crew were ever questioned. Tapes were never taken, and after a couple days, it turned into a great story with friends. It wasn't until 2009 until Jay Stratton had contacted me to investigate. Unbeknownst to all, he was part of the ATIP program in the Pentagon led by Lou Elizondo. There was an unofficial official report that came out that's now on the internet. Years later, I was contacted by the other pilot, Alex Dietrich, and asked if I'd been contacted, and I said no, but I'm willing to talk. I was contacted by Mr. Elizondo, and we talked for a short period of time, and he said we'd be in contact. A few weeks after that, I was made aware that Lou had left the Pentagon in protest and joined forces with Tom DeLonge, Chris Mellon, Steve Justice, and others to form Two Stars Academy, an organization that pressed the issue with leading industry experts and U.S. government officials. They worked with Leslie Keene, who is present today, Ralph Blumenthal, and Helene Cooper to publish the articles in the New York Times 2017 New York Times. And it removed the stigma on the topic of UFOs, which is why we're here today.
This is for any one of you. Based off of each of your experiences and observations, do you believe UAPs pose a potential threat to our national security?
Yes, and here's why. The technology that we faced was far superior than anything that we had, and you could put that anywhere. If you had one, you captured one, you reverse engineered it, you got it to work, you're talking something that can go into space, go someplace, drop down in a matter of seconds, do whatever it wants, and leave, and there's nothing we can do about it. Nothing.
Okay.
Okay. Just briefly, I also just want to note, particularly for the two pilots, and I have a question for Mr. Grush. One of the things that I found fascinating in our discussion, Mr. Graves, last night as well, is that you both described UAPs and formations and the way they are observed in space or in our air, and the way that they move is essentially ways in which current technology or aircraft that we know of are unable to actually function or move. And so will you just, for the public record, again, once again, briefly just either describe or note that aircraft that are being witnessed, particularly by the 30 folks that you're working with, are essentially outside the scope of anything that we know of today and the technology we have today. Mr. Graves, Mr. Fravor?
Yes, the objects that are being seen by commercial pilots are performing maneuvers that are unexplainable due to our current understanding of our technology and our capabilities as a country, and that applies for the military as well.
Mr. Fravor?
Yeah, I concur with that. We have nothing that can stop in midair and go the other direction, nor do we have anything that can, like in our situation, come down from space, hang out for 3 hours, and go back up.
Thank you. My last question, and sometimes I know that you have also said some of these answers in the past, but we're trying to get them on the public record as well, which is really important. Mr. Grush, finally, do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General, and some of which to the intelligence committees. I actually had the people with the firsthand knowledge provide a protected disclosure to the Inspector General.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I would just say that I think that these questions are important questions, and I look forward to being involved in the process to get those answered. I know there'll be a lot of questions from other committee members, so I yield back.
Mr. Graves, again, I'd like to know, how do you know that these were not our aircraft?
Some of the behaviors that we saw in a working area, we would see these objects being at 0.0 Mach, that's 0 airspeed, over certain pieces of the ground. So what that means, just like a river, if you throw a bobber in, it's going to float downstream. These objects were staying completely stationary in Category 4 hurricane winds. These same objects would then accelerate to supersonic speeds, 1.1, 1.2 Mach, and they would do so in very erratic and quick behaviors that I don't have an explanation for.
Okay. Mr. Favor, what astonished you the most about the flight capabilities of these Tic Tac, very briefly?
The performance, absolute performance. It was.
And you're not aware of any other objects that anybody in the world has, in this world, that has those capabilities?
No, I think it's far beyond actually our material science that we currently possess.
Are you aware of any other reconnaissance platforms that have tracked or recorded the Tic Tac's maneuvers, maybe the NORAD system or any of the others?
I am not.
Okay. Mr. Grush, thank you for being here, brother. Thank you all very much. Have you faced any retaliation or reprisals for any of your testimony or anything on these lines?
Yeah, I have to be careful what I say in detail because there is an open whistleblower reprisal investigation on my behalf, and I don't want to compromise that investigation by providing anything that may help provide somebody information. But it was very brutal and very unfortunate, some of the tactics they used to hurt me both professionally and personally, to be quite frank. Yeah.
It's very unfortunate, as they say, when you're over the target, that's when they do the most firing at you. Do you have any personal knowledge of people who have been harmed or injured in efforts to cover up or conceal these extraterrestrial technology?
Yes. Personally.
Have anyone been murdered that you would think, that you know of or have heard of, I guess?
I have to be careful asking that question. I directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities.
Maybe in a, if we could get in a confidential area, SCIF, we could talk about that. But unfortunately, we were denied access to the SCIF, and that's very unfortunate in this scenario. Mr. Favor, do you believe that you witnessed an additional object under the water in relation to your encounter?
I will say we did not see an object. There was something there to cause the whitewater, and when we turned around, it was gone, so there was something there that obviously moved.
Okay, it was not the same object, though, that you were looking at, correct?
No, we actually joked that the Tic Tac was communicating with something when we came back, and because the whitewater disappeared.
We were, in another instance, we're told about the capabilities of a jamming during viewing of when there were some people chasing some of these objects. Did you experience any of that jamming or interrupting your radar or weapons system?
My crew that launched after we landed experienced significant jamming to the APG-73 radar, which was what we had on board, which is a mechanically scanned, very high-end system prior to the APG-79. And yes, it did pretty much everything you could do, range, velocity, aspect, and then it spit the lock, and the targeting pod is passive. That's what we were able to get the video on.
I'm about to run out of time, but are you aware of any of our enemies that have that capability?
No.
Okay, I would also like to note for the record that, like George Knapp, breaking Area 51, he's the reason I knew about that, and the reason I know about the Tic Tacs is Leslie Keene from New York Times article, and I would encourage everybody to read that.
And what is your general interpretation of these phenomena, or what is your current thinking of trying to make sense of them?
Well, I'll say, you know, I'm not like a UFO fanatic. It's not me. But I will tell you that what we saw with 4 sets of eyes over a 5-minute period, still, there's nothing, we have nothing close to it. It was amazing to see. I told my buddy I wanted to fly it, but yeah, it's just an incredible technology.
Mr. Grush, in speaking to you yesterday, I just wanted to follow up on Representative Raskin's questions. In the last couple of years, have you had incidences that have caused you to be in fear for your life for addressing these issues?
Yes, personally.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want everyone to note that he's coming forward in fear of his life. To put in perspective, if they were really not scared about this information coming out, why would someone be intimidated like that? To your knowledge, are NHIs working with adversarial foreign governments in either technology exchange programs or back engineering programs?
I don't have data on that. I'm not sure.
Have you heard or you had people come forward to present that evidence?
Not that particular evidence that you just espoused.
Okay, on the 19th of April, Dr. Kirkpatrick, head of Aero, had said that he did not find any evidence of UAPs. You also stated that you had, in your interview, that you had briefed him on information that you were uncovering, but that he did not follow up with you. Were the items that you divulged to him pertinent to national security?
Yes, him and I had a classified conversation in April 2022 before he took over Aero in July 2022, and I provided him some concerns I had.
Do you know why he might not have followed up with you?
Unfortunately, I cannot read his mind. I wish he did. I was happy to give sage counsel to him on where to look when he took the helm of Aero.
Okay, and then my last question for you before I move to Mr. Graves is you received prior approval from the Defense Department to speak on certain issues, correct?
Correct, through DOPSR, DoD Pre-Publication and Security Review, and I just want to remind the public, they're just looking from a security perspective. These are my own personal views and opinions, not the department's.
Okay, I'm asking that though mainly because I think that there are many people that would like to discredit you. So it does bring a certain amount of credibility to your testimony.
I'm required by law to do that as a former intelligence officer, or I go to jail for revealing classified information.
Yeah, we don't want you to go to jail. My next question would actually be for Mr. Graves. Can you please explain to me in detail the event that occurred at Vandenberg Air Force Base?
Certainly. In the 2003 timeframe, a large group of Boeing contractors were operating near one of the launch facilities at Vandenberg Air Force Base when they observed a very large 100-yard sided red square approach the base from the ocean and hover at low altitude over one of the launch facilities. This object remained for about 45 seconds or so before darting off over the mountains. There was a similar event within 24 hours later in the evening. This was a morning event, I believe 8:45 in the morning. Later in the evening, post-sunset, there were reports of other sightings on base, including some aggressive behaviors. These objects were approaching some of the security guards at rapid speeds before darting off. And this is information that was received through one of the witnesses that have approached me at Americans for Safe Aerospace.
Was this documented in any official form, whether it was a police blotter?
Yes, they had official documentation and records from the event that the witness held over the years.
And I'm not going to ask you to do it right now for time reasons, but you'd be able to sketch what was witnessed, correct? And have you seen that before on any other equipment and/or during your flight time?
I have not seen what they've described. This object was estimated to be almost the size of a football field, and I have not seen anything personally that large.
Okay, and then another question on follow-up referencing the gimbal video Go Fast incident. Can you just clarify, because to our understanding, the footage was actually cut off at a certain point, but what happens at the end of that video, just for those Americans specifically that are wanting to know about the rest of that footage?
Certainly. There was some uncertainty or instability with the object. It seemed to rock a bit, and that's the last I had seen of the video. Much of the data that I would recommend be analyzed would consist of radar data that would provide precise kinematics on the object, as well as the fleet of objects that were operating nearby.
Good. Mr. Moskowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, let's talk about the laws of physics for a second. Mr. Graves and Commander Favor, I heard you talk about speed. When those objects broke the sound barrier, did they make a sonic boom?
I was in a jet. You can't hear anything. It's kind of loud in there.
Yeah, you're not able to actually personally tell within the vehicle. I will say the objects that we were seeing, they were spherical, and they were observed up to Mach 2, which is a very non-aerodynamic shape.
What about G-forces? Let's talk about G-forces of those vehicles. Could a human survive those G-forces with known technology today?
No.
No, not for the acceleration rates that we observed.
Okay. What about what they look like? How close did you get? Did you see a seam or a rivet or a section? And what I mean is, obviously, the jets you're flying have all those things. Did these objects have those?
Do you want to go, Ryan?
I didn't have the detail to be able to tell that.
So we got within a half mile of Tic Tac, which people say that's pretty far, but in airplanes, that's actually relatively close. No, it was perfectly white, smooth, no windows, although when we did take the original FLIR video that is out there, when you put it on a big screen, it actually had two little objects that came out of the bottom of it. But other than that, no windows, no seams, no nothing.
Mr. Grush, as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself of non-human origin craft?
Yes, I personally interviewed those individuals.
Mr. Grush, as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself about ATs, advanced technologies that the U.S. government has?
Based on conventional advanced tech, I was briefed to the preponderance of the Defense Department's both space and aerospace compartmented programs, yeah. Why?
Do you have direct knowledge, or you had spoken to people with direct knowledge that this imagery applies to crash sites, crash imagery?
I can't discuss that in an open session.
Okay. Do you have any information that the U.S. government is involved in a disinformation campaign to deny the existence of certain UAPs?
I can't go beyond what I've already stated publicly in my News Nation interview because it touches other sensitivities.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to direct this, I believe, to Mr. Grush, but if any of you all feel like you need to jump in, just jump right in. We're good. Has the U.S. government become aware of actual evidence of extraterrestrial, otherwise unexplained forms of intelligence? And if so, when do you think this first occurred?
I like to use the term non-human. I don't like to denote origin. Keeps the aperture open, both scientifically. Right. Certainly, like I've discussed publicly previously, 1930s.
Okay. Can you give me the names and titles of the people with direct firsthand knowledge and access to some of this crash retrieval, some of these crash retrieval programs, and maybe which facilities, military bases that the recovered material would be in? And I know a lot of Congress have talked about we're going to go to Area 51, and and there's nothing there anymore anyway. It's just and we move like a glacier. And as soon as we announce it, I'm sure the moving vans would pull up. But please.
I can't discuss that publicly, but I did provide that information both to the Intel committees and the Inspector General.
And we could get that in the SCIF if we were allowed to get in a SCIF with you. Would that be probably what you would think?
Sure, if you had the appropriate accesses, yeah.
What special access programs cover this information, and how is it possible that they have evaded oversight for so long?
I do know the names. Once again, I can't discuss that publicly and how they've evaded oversight. In a closed setting, I can tell you the specific tradecraft used.
All right. When do you think those programs began, and who authorized them?
I do know a lot of that information, but that's something I can't discuss publicly because of sensitive
All right.
issues.
If any of y'all want to jump in on any of this, you're more than welcome to. What level of security clearance is required to fully access these programs?
Well, anybody who has...
And I say that because myself, Representative Gates and Representative Luna were basically turned away at one point at Eglin. So please go right ahead.
Certainly difference between member access and, say, somebody like me, but anybody who has a TSSCI clearance and meets the eligibility criteria, the access adjudicative authority should be able to grant you access.
Mr. Burchett, if you'll yield, so just to put a fine point on that, there's nothing that you're aware of that's above special access program classification.
It's a misnomer that there's anything actually above top secret. Executive Order 13526 delineates the classification levels.
Right, but I draw a point on that because we can have access to those programs, and so the notion that we're not being given that access sort of defies our typical muscle memory here in Congress. Thank you, Mr. Burchett. I'll yield back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Along those lines, Title 10, you may not know this or not, but Title 10 and Title 50 authorization, they seem to say they're inefficient. So who gets to decide this, in your opinion, in the past?
It's a group of career senior executive officials.
Okay, are they government officials?
Both in and out.
Do what?
Both in and out of government, and that's about as far as I can go there.
All right, well, that leads to my next question. Which private corporations are directly involved in this program? How much taxpayer money has been invested in these programs, to your knowledge? I mean, we know we audit the Pentagon every year, and I've been here 5 years, and they failed the dadgum thing every year. They lose over $1 billion a year, we think, and I was told the Department of Defense maybe 60% of their assets are unaccounted for, whatever the heck that means. In the public sector, you go to jail for that kind of crap. So tell me.
Yeah, I know when I'm $1 off of my DTS travel voucher, I get hammered, but it seems like it doesn't work the other way,
If you
right?
sell over if you sell over $600 worth of stuff on eBay now, you get a call from the IRS. So please, what corporations?
Yeah, I don't know the specific metrics towards the end of your question. The specific corporations I did provide to the committees in specific divisions, and I spent 11 and a half hours with both Intel committees. So.
Okay, has there been an active U.S. government disinformation campaign to deny the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena? And if so, why?
I can't go beyond what I've already espoused publicly about that.
I apologize, my time is limited. Mr. Graves, one of your main concerns is that the FAA currently does not have an official process to receive reports of UAP from pilots or others, correct?
Correct.
And in your experience, what data should the Aero program prioritize for potential collection? We have, location, date, time, but are there other specific characteristics that should be included in these reports?
Certainly. I think that there's two categories that would be important. One would be kinematics and understanding the specifics of how the vehicle or objects are moving. And the second would be a more zoomed out approach of being able to look at origin and destination before the incident, as well as getting a better contextual understanding of how these objects are interacting with each other.
Thank you. Now, because I only have a minute left, I apologize, we only have 5 minutes today, but For the record, if you were me, where would you look? Titles, programs, departments, regions, if you could just name anything. And I put that as an open question to the three of you.
I'd be happy to give you that in a closed environment. I can tell you specifically.
Thank you. Commander Fravor?
And I would say, and I've told people that you have to know where to look. They're not going to divulge it to you because of the classification levels. But if you know where to look and who to talk to, which is exactly what Mr. Grush can point you, then you have them.
Okay. Mr. Graves?
I was an operator, so I was depending on folks like Mr. Grosh to do that homework.
Okay. Thank you very much. I yield back to the chair.
And so, I think that's because I'm from Missouri, you've got to show me, right? With that being said, there's been a lot of things that have been said in the public, Mr. Grush, and so I want to get down to, if we can, some specifics, right? So, at one point you had said that there has been harmful activity or aggressive activity. Has any of the activity been aggressive, been hostile in your reports?
I know of multiple colleagues of mine that got physically injured. And the activity, and I got to...
By UAPs or by people within the federal government?
Both.
Okay, so there has been activity by alien or non-human technology and or beings that has caused harm to humans?
I can't get into the specifics in an open environment, but at least the activity that I personally witnessed, and I have to be very careful here, because they tell you never to acknowledge tradecraft, right? So what I personally witnessed, myself and my wife, was very disturbing.
Okay. One of my constituents actually sent this next question, and I figured I'd ask it since I had the same thought. You've said that the U.S. has intact spacecraft. You said that the government has alien bodies or alien species. Have you seen the spacecraft?
I have to be careful to describe what I've seen firsthand and not in this environment, but I could answer that question behind closed doors. Yeah.
And have you seen any of the bodies?
That's something I've not witnessed myself.
Okay, and so with that being said, and the other statement that has been made that was intriguing to me it's intriguing because my view has been that we are billions of light years away from any other system. And the concept that an alien species that's technologically advanced enough to travel billions of light years gets here and somehow is incompetent enough to not survive Earth or crashes is something that I find a little bit far-fetched. And with that being said, you have mentioned that there's interdimensional potential. Could you expound on that?
Yeah, to answer your first question, and I'm here as a fact witness and expert, but I will give you a theoretical framework, at least to work off, to kind of espouse crashes, regardless of your level of sentience, right? Planes crash, cars crash, n number of sorties, however high, a small percentage are going to end in mission failure, if you will, as we say in the Air Force. And then in terms of multidimensionality, that kind of thing, the framework that I'm familiar with, for example, is something called the holographic principle. It derives itself from general relativity and quantum mechanics, and that is, if you want to imagine a 3D object such as yourself casting a shadow onto a 2D surface, that's the holographic principle. So you can be projected, quasi-projected from higher dimensional space to lower dimensional. It's a scientific trope that you can actually cross, literally, as far as I understand, but there's probably guys with PhDs that we could probably argue about that.
But you have not seen any documentation that that's what's occurring?
Only a theoretical framework discussion, yes.
Okay. Okay. Occam's razor is that these aircraft, have they been identified that they are being produced by domestic, military and contractors? Is there any evidence that that's what's being recovered?
Not to my knowledge, plus the recoveries predate a lot of our advanced programs that I previously am witting of, so.
Would it be safe to say that there could be a scenario today where you have an aircraft that crashes and because it's been involved in one program from one federal agency, and but the agency that retrieves it is not aware of that program, and to them it appears alien in origin?
I mean, that's a hypothetical situation. I'm not aware of any historical situation that would match that you described, so.
You're not aware, it has not happened that you're aware of?
That I'm aware of.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Several months ago, my office received a protected disclosure from Eglin Air Force Base indicating that there was a UAP incident that required my attention. I sought a briefing regarding that episode and brought with me Congressman Burchett and Congresswoman Luna. We asked to see any of the evidence that had been taken by flight crew in this endeavor and to observe any radar signature as well as to meet with the flight crew. We were not afforded access to all of the flight crew. And initially, we were not afforded access to images and to radar. Thereafter, we had a bit of a discussion about how authorities flow in the United States of America, and we did see the image. And we did meet with one member of the flight crew who took the image. The image was of something that I am not able to attach to any human capability, either from the United States or from any of our adversaries. And I'm somewhat informed on the matter, having served on the Armed Services Committee for 7 years, having served on the committee that oversees DARPA and advanced technologies for several years. When we spoke with the flight crew, and when he showed us the photo that he'd taken, I asked why the video wasn't engaged, why we didn't have a FLIR system that worked. Here's what he said. They were out on a test mission that day over the Gulf of Mexico. And when you're on a test mission, you're supposed to have clear airspace. Not supposed to be anything that shows up. And they saw a sequence of 4 craft in a clear diamond formation for which there is a radar sequence that I alone have observed in the United States Congress. One of the pilots goes to check out that diamond formation and sees a large floating, what I can only describe as an orb. Again, like I said, not of any human capability that I'm aware of. And when he approached, he said that his radar went down, he said that his FLIR system malfunctioned, and that he had to manually take this image from one of the lenses, and it was not automated in collection, as you would typically see in a test mission. So I guess I'll start with Commander Fravor. How should we think about the fact that this craft that was approached by our pilot had the capability of disarming a number of the sensor and collection systems on that craft?
Well, I think this goes to that national security side, and you can go back through history of things showing up at certain areas and disabling our capabilities, which is disheartening. And for us, I mean, like I said, it completely disabled the radar on the aircraft when it tried to do it, and the only way we could see it is passively, which is how he got that image. So I think that's a concern on what are these doing, not only how do they operate, but their capabilities inside to do things like this.
And how should we think about 4 craft moving in a very clear formation, equidistant from one another, in a diamond? In all of the phenomenon, perhaps, Mr. Grave, that you've analyzed, have we ever seen multiple craft in a single formation?
I have one particular case, and that was during the gimbal incident. The recording on the AT FLIR system shows a single object that rotates. You hear the pilots refer to a fleet of objects that is not visible on the FLIR system, and that was something that I witnessed during the debrief as part of the radar data on the situational awareness page. I would like to add, however, Congressman, there's a small bit of anger, I would say. I would feel that those pilots are still facing that difficulty in reporting this topic, and they don't have the tools to be able to mitigate this issue. It just goes to show how serious this is and why this is such an important issue for our pilots and for our nation.
It was stated explicitly to me by these test pilots that if you have a UAP experience, the best thing you can do for your career is forget it and not tell anyone. Because any type of reporting, either above the surface or below the surface, does have a perceived consequence to these people, and that is a culture we must change if we want to get to the truth. Mr. Chairman, I would observe that perhaps as we move forward from this hearing, there are some obvious next steps. Every person watching this knows that we need to meet with Mr. Grush in a secure, compartmentalized facility so that we can get fulsome answers that do not put him in jeopardy and that give us the information we need. Second, I would suggest that the radar images that were collected of this formation of craft out of Eglin Air Force Base, and specifically the actual image taken by the actual flight crew that we can actually validate, be provided to the committee, subpoenaed if necessary, so that we're able to track how to get this type of reporting and analysis done in a more fulsome way. That would be my recommendation, humbly, as a guest here of the fine Oversight Committee. I yield back.
Ms. Mace?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to our witnesses who are testifying today. I want to thank each of you for being here to discuss a topic of grave importance to our national security. Earlier this year, a Chinese spy balloon was shot down off the coast of my home state of South Carolina. Since the Roswell incident in 1947, many Americans have wondered about the dangers of unknown objects crisscrossing our skies. Whether these are UAPs or weather phenomena, advanced technology from American allied or enemy forces, or something more out of this world. So my first question, I have several questions, and if we could just be quick on these first two, I'm going to ask each of you the same question, and then I'll get to each of you individually. The first one, when you reported your experiences with a UAP, did any of you face any repercussions with your superiors, yes or no?
No.
No. I've actually never seen anything personally, believe it or not. So.
All right. And then do you believe there's an active disinformation campaign within our government to deny existence of UAPs, yes or no?
I don't have an answer to that.
As previously stated publicly, yes.
I think previously with like Project Blue Book, yes, but currently I don't speak for the United States government.
Okay, thank you. I have a few questions for Mr. Graves. What percentage of UAP sightings, in your belief, go unreported by our pilots?
This is an approximation based off of my personal experience speaking with a number of pilots, but I would estimate we're somewhere near 5% reporting, perhaps.
So like 95% basically don't report seeing UAPs?
That's just my personal estimate.
In the incident off Virginia Beach, do you believe the Navy took the danger to your aircraft seriously after it was reported?
Absolutely.
A few questions for Mr. Favor. As an expert naval aviator, have you ever seen an object that looked and moved like the Tic Tac UAP?
No.
Did the Tic Tac UAP move in such a way that defied the laws of physics?
The way we understand them, yes.
Many dismiss UAP reports as classified weapons testing by our own government, but in your experience as a pilot, does our government typically test advanced weapon systems right next to multi-million-dollar jets without informing our pilots?
No, we have test ranges for that.
It took over 15 years for your encounter with the Tic Tac to be declassified. Do you feel there was a good reason to prevent lawmakers from having access to this footage?
No, I just think it was ignored when it happened, and it just sat somewhere in a file, never got reported.
In a drawer. It happens a lot up here. Shocker. Mr. Grush, a couple of questions for you too, sir, this morning. What percentage of UAPs do you feel are adequately investigated by the U.S. government, of the 5% that are reported?
I can only speak for my personal leadership over at NGA. I tried to look at every report that came through that I could triage, so.
Do you believe that officials at the highest levels of our national security apparatus have unlawfully withheld information from Congress and subverted our oversight authority?
There are certain elected leaders that had more information that I'm not sure what they've shared with certain Gang of Eight members or et cetera, but certainly I would not be surprised.
Okay. You've stated that the government is in possession of potentially non-human spacecraft. Based on your experience and extensive conversations with experts, do you believe our government has made contact with intelligent extraterrestrials?
Something I can't discuss in public setting.
Okay, I can't ask when you think this occurred. If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
And was this documentary evidence, this video, photos, eyewitness? Like, how would that be determined?
The specific documentation I would have to talk to you in a skiff about.
Gotcha. Okay, so, and you may or may not be able to answer my last question, and maybe we get into a skiff at the next hearing that we have, but who in the government, either what agency, sub-agency, what contractors, who should be called into the next hearing about UAPs, either in a public setting or even in a private setting? And you probably can't name names, but what agencies or organizations, contractors, et cetera, do we need to call in to get these questions answered, whether it's about funding, what programs are happening, and what's out there?
I can give you a specific cooperative and hostile witness list of specific individuals that were in those.
And how soon can we get that list?
I'm happy to provide that to you after the hearing.
Super, thank you, and I yield back.
Commander Fravor, we have all seen the floating Tic Tac video that you engaged with on November 14th, 2004. Can you briefly talk about why you were off the coast of San Diego that day?
Yeah, we were at a workup with all the battle groups, so we integrate the ships with the carrier, the air wing with the carrier, and we start working. So we were doing an air-to-air defense to hone not only our skills, but those of the USS Princeton when they had been tracking them for 2 weeks. The problem was that there was never manned aircraft airborne when they were tracking them, and this was the first day, and unfortunately, we were the ones airborne and went and saw it.
Do you remember the weather that day? Was it cloudy or windy or anything out of the ordinary on the Pacific coast?
It was actually, if you're familiar with San Diego, it was a perfect day, light winds, no whitecaps, clear skies, not a cloud. It was, for flying, it was the best.
Now, is it true that you saw, in your words, a 40-foot flying Tic Tac shaped object?
That's correct. Or for some people that can't know what a Tic Tac is, it's a giant flying propane tank.
Fair enough. Did this object come up on radar or interfere with your radar or the USS Princeton?
The Princeton tracked it, the Nimitz tracked it, the E-2 tracked it. We never saw it on our radars. Our fire control radars never picked it up. The other airplane that took the video did get it on a radar. As soon as it tried to lock it, it jammed the radar, spit the lock, and he rapidly switched over to the targeting pod, which you can do in the F-18.
From what you saw that day and what you've seen on video, did you see any source of propulsion from the flying object, including on any potential thermal scans from your aircraft?
No, there's none. There's no IR plume coming out, and Chad, who took the video, went through all the EO, which is black and white TV, and the IR modes, and there's no visible signs of propulsion. It's just sitting in space at 20,000 feet.
In your career, have you ever seen a propulsion system that creates no thermal exhaust?
No.
Can you describe how the aircraft maneuvered?
Abruptly, very determinate. It knew exactly what it was doing. It was aware of our presence, and it had acceleration rates. I mean, it went from 0 to matching our speed in no time at all.
Now, if the fastest plane on Earth was trying to do these maneuvers that you saw, would it be capable of doing that?
No, not even close.
And just to confirm, this object had no wings, correct?
No wings.
Now, was the aircraft that you were flying, was it armed?
No, never felt threatened at all.
If the aircraft was armed, do you believe that your aircraft or any aircraft in possession of the United States could have shot the Tic Tac down?
I'd say no. Just on the performance, it would just left in a split second.
It looks like that we have a problem here that needs further investigation.
Yes.
In your belief, is this flying Tic Tac, I mean, is it capable of being the product of any other nation on the earth?
No, like I said earlier, I think it defies current material science and the ability to develop that much propulsion. And I know there's been some physicists who have done calculations, which is beyond anything that we have.
well, either the United States has an adversary here in this world that we don't know, or we really have some serious investigations to do. I really appreciate you being here. Is there anything else about the November 14th, 2004 incident that you think is important for this committee to know that you haven't been asked here today?
No, it's been said it's probably the most credible UFO sighting in history based on all the sensors that were tracking it, and then for us to get visual and to go against the naysayers that it's something on the screen or whatever. I mean, there's 4 sets of human eyeballs. We're all very credible. Of the 6 of us that were involved in the thing, including the video, every one of us is going to do 20+ years in the military in very responsible positions. So I'd say the world needs to know that. It's not a joke.
Well, thank you very much for your testimony here today for all of you, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
So when we think about traditional adversaries and both us towards them and them towards us, we probe their capabilities. We look for weaknesses, and we collect that data, that reconnaissance for in the event we need it in the future. For each of you, yes or no question, based off of your own experience or the data that you've been privy to, is there any indication that these UAPs could be essentially collecting reconnaissance information? Mr. Graves?
Yes.
Mr. Grush?
Fair assessment, yeah.
Mr. Fravor?
Very possible.
Again, in the national security vein, is it possible that these UAPs would be probing our capabilities? Yes or no, Mr. Graves?
Yes.
Grush?
Yes.
Fravor?
Definitely.
Is it possible that these UAPs are testing for vulnerabilities in our current systems?
Yes.
Yes.
Possible.
Do you feel, based off of your experience and the information that you've been privy to, that these UAPs provide an existential threat to the national security of the United States? Mr. Graves?
Potentially.
Yes, sir, potentially.
Same answer, potentially.
Yeah, I'd say
Fravor?
definitely, potentially.
Mr. Graves and Fravor, in the event that your encounters had become hostile, would you have had the capability to defend yourself, your crew, your aircraft?
Absolutely not.
Sir?
No.
Is, based off of the information that you've been privy to, is there any indication that these UAPs are interested in our nuclear technology and capabilities?
Yes.
By external observation, sure, that could be a fair assessment, yeah.
Yes.
Is there any indication that the Department of Energy is involved in UAP data collection and housing?
I don't have an answer.
I can't confirm or deny that in a public setting.
And could you do it in a secure setting?
Yes.
Mr. Fravor?
No, I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, I think I'm the last member to go, but there clearly is a threat to the national security of the United States of America. As members of Congress, we have a responsibility to maintain oversight and be aware of these activities so that, if appropriate, we take action. I would encourage the chairman to demand that we have any and all, but in particular Mr. Grush, talk to us in a skiff. And if that access is denied, I will personally volunteer to initiate the Holman Rule against any personnel or any program or any agency that denies access to Congress.
Mr. Grush, I might have asked this before, but I want to make sure. Do you have any personal knowledge of someone who's possibly been injured working on legacy UAP reverse engineering?
Yes.
Okay. How were they injured? Is it something like a radioactive type situation or something we didn't understand? I've heard people talk about Havana syndrome type incidences. What was your recollection of that?
I can't get into specifics, but you could imagine assessing an unknown unknown. There's a lot of potentialities you can't fully prepare for.
Are you aware of any individuals that are participating in reverse engineering programs for non-terrestrial craft?
Personally, yes.
Do you know any that would be willing to testify if there were protections for them?
Certainly closed door and assurances that breaking their NDA, they're not going to get administratively punished for so. Yeah.
I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Chairman, I'd like to submit for the record an article by News Nation, and it follows Mr. Grush's full interview for the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. Grush, why is it that you refer to the phenomenon as non-human intelligence? Why deviate from the basis of extraterrestrial life?
I think the phenomenon is very complex, and I like to leave an open mind analytically to specific origin.
When you say specific origin, are you referring, can you elaborate on that for those that might not?
If it's a traditional extraterrestrial origin or something else that we don't quite understand from either a biological or astrophysics perspective, yeah, I just like to keep an open mind on what it could be, yeah.
Okay, and referring to your News Nation interview, you had referenced specific treaties between governments. Article 3 of the Nuclear Arms Treaty with Russia identifies UAPs. It specifically mentions them. To your knowledge, are there safety measures in place with foreign governments or other superpowers to avoid an escalatory situation in the event that a UAP malevolent event occurs?
Yeah, you're referring to actual public treaty in the UN Register. It's funny you mentioned that. Yeah, the Agreement on Measures to Reduce the Risk of Outbreak of Nuclear War signed in 1971. Unclassified treaty, publicly available. And if you cite the George Washington University National Security Archives, you will find the declassified in 2013 specific provisions in the specific red line flash message traffic with the specific codes pursuant to Article 3 and Article, also Situation 2, which is in the previously classified NSA archive. What I would recommend, and I tried to get access, but I got a wall of silence at the White House, was those specific incidents when those message traffic was used. I think some scholarship on that would open the door to a further investigation using those publicly available information.
Thank you. And then
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and I thank the witnesses for their endurance and service today. Mr. Fravor, you've described your episode in detail now, and you call it the most credible UFO sighting in history. But I wonder, was this the first time that you encountered a UFO or a UAP in 2004?
Yes.
And what was your general attitude or perspective on the UFO discussion before that happened?
I never felt that we were alone with all the planets out there, but I wasn't a UFO person. I wasn't watching History Channel and MUFON and all that.
And have you had experiences or encounters since that happened?
No.
And so have you formed any general conclusions about what you think you experienced then?
Yes. I think what we experienced was, like I said, well beyond the material science and the capabilities that we had at the time, that we have currently, or that we're going to have in the next 10 to 20 years.
Very good. Mr. Grush, you've been able to answer in great detail on certain questions, and then other things you say you're not able to respond to. Can you just explain where you're drawing the line and what's the basis for that?
Yeah, based on my DOPSR security review and what they've determined that is unclassified.
I see. So you're answering any questions that just call upon your knowledge of unclassified questions, but anything that relates to classified matters you're not commenting on in this context?
In an open session, but happy to participate in a closed session at the right level, yeah.
Okay. And Mr. Graves, you've said that there are dozens of fellow pilots, military pilots. Are there also commercial pilots who've encountered the same kind of sightings that you described before?
They are similar. Commercial pilots have less range and less sensors to be able to reach out and look for objects over wide swaths of airspace. And so pilots are seeing them, commercial pilots are seeing them, and they're typically closer, and the range of what they're seeing is pretty large.
What is the most vivid, concrete sighting with the naked eye of the objects that you described before, the cube-like objects?
Certainly. I think the most vivid sighting of that would have been near midair that we had at the entrance to our working area. One of these objects was completely stationary at the exact entrance to our working areas, not only geographically, but also at altitude. So it was right where all the jets are going, essentially, on the eastern seaboard. The two aircraft flew within about 50 feet of the object, and that was a very close visual sighting.
And you were in one of the aircraft?
I was not. I was there when the pilot landed. He canceled the mission after, and I was there. He was in the ready room with all his gear on, with his mouth open, and I asked him what the problem was, and he said he almost hit one of those darn things.
He said he was 50 feet away from it?
Yes, sir.
And his description of the object was consistent with the description you gave us before?
A dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere.
Inside of a clear sphere?
Yes.
And with no self-evident propulsion system?
No wings, no IR energy coming off of the vehicle, nothing tethering it to the ground, and that was primarily what we were experiencing out there.
I'm over time. Thank you very much for your service, and I yield back to Mr. Chairman.